Hey, everyone. Hello. Hi. Welcome to the For the Love podcast.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Thanks for joining us.
I know. We've got a really good conversation for you today. I know I say that every time, but I mean it.
You do mean it.
I mean it. Like, and this one is, let me just put it like this. I'll put a pin in it and we're going to get to it. But if you have ever in your life or are currently in a relationship with another human,
right.
full stop. If anything in that relationship has ever not been perfect,
Right.
if you've ever had an argument, if you've ever struggled with boundaries, if you have ever experienced codependency, if you have ever fought, if you have ever been like, why are you the way that you are?
And why is this hard?
Why is this hard? This is your episode. So you're going to want to hang on for sure. It was actually, and I'm glad that you just mentioned this, Amy, because you are the one that put our guest on the podcast radar for today. So we are having this episode today because Amy Harden was like, I have someone that I would like us to speak to.
Yeah.
What was your kind of intro to Casey?
I think I told her in the interview, I think I found her about 2021. I found her through a Epstein-Barr, message board.
Oh my God, that is so something that you would say. I'm just saying that is a sentence that you would say.
I was trying to find resources to get through my days.
Okay.
And someone said her approach to self-care is revolutionary and so gentle and kind. Like, go listen to her, go download her stuff. So I did. And a lot of her, like, she has lists for people with chronic illness, people who are neurodivergent in any kind of way. Everything from like really simple recipes to adjusting your daily to-do lists. And a lot of it mirrors your nighttime gin, morning gin, just being kind to yourself.
Yes.
But she really emphasizes adjusting those closing duties that nighttime
that
Casey
for people
would
who
do.
don't understand what closing of the day. Yeah.
So if your nighttime gin regimen is usually 5 things that will really make a difference in your morning. On a day when you are struggling for whatever reason, it is okay to adjust that to 2 things.
I see.
Like, what is most important? What will make the biggest difference in my morning and allow me to maybe continue on with my regular to-do list? It's just a different way of dealing with yourself.
Oh my gosh, it's so,
honestly.
I remember seeing her stuff during COVID. That she sort of spiked during the pandemic. Several of her things went viral.
She had a TED Talk.
That's right. And I remember feeling like lots of people are trying to tell us what to do with a task list. You know, like, that's not new. Like, everyone is telling us how to better organize our home, how to better organize our lives, how to handle the pantry. But her thing is from this lens of high degree of self-compassion.
Yeah.
0 shoulds. One thing, a phrase she uses a lot, and she mentions it here too on the show, is, what does she call it? Neutral.
Morally neutral.
Morally neutral. Dishes in your sink are morally neutral. I have absolutely attached morality to that, because if the sink is clean, I am being a good person.
Yes.
I am being a good homemaker. I am being a responsible person who doesn't procrastinate. I assign so many things to that. And so her just taking some of the air out of that balloon is pretty powerful.
And with the intention of helping people understand, like, that you do deserve that kindness, even if you're the one offering the kindness.
Yes.
She has lots of stories of moms who are struggling for whatever reason. In her TED Talk, she talks about a mom who's experienced infant loss. And it's just debilitated, and feeling shame that her house is falling apart. And the simple shift of just cleaning 2 coffee cups before she goes to bed so that she has clean coffee cups in the morning for her and her husband is enough for her to sort of start putting one foot in front of the other.
I love that.
And she almost always follows it up with like, because you deserve to be well fed. You deserve to wake up and have a clean cup.
Completely different approach.
Just do that one thing and that it's okay.
That's so good. That's kind of who she is. And I told her at the end of this interview, I'm like, you're just what we hoped you would be.
Yeah.
You knew what I meant by that. Like,
Yeah.
the way in which she talks, her personality, this very accessible, kind of almost no nonsense, like way of discussing mental wellness, but then also relationships, which is what we're really about to get into here. Sometimes, we talk to so many professionals on the shows, tons of therapists, tons of counselors, tons of experts, and always useful. I'm always grateful every time they bring their expertise to bear. But sometimes there is a real sense of you're an expert.
Yeah.
You're an expert, like over there on Expert Island. And like we're over here in our homes with these people trying to just sort our shit out. And somehow she does both. She brings both like expertise and this sense of I'm in it too. She gave several personal examples today where she literally described the recurring issue in my marriage.
Yeah.
I didn't even want to look over at you. I'm like, does Amy know that like, except our roles were reversed. I'm the retreater, like her husband, like she described her as I'm the.
Yeah.
And,
same. The whole time she was talking, I was like, oh my gosh.
No, I know. I'm like
over there.
My God, I'm avoidant. I'm so avoidant, and I'm still working on that. And maybe what's your conflict style?
It depends on the relationship.
Yeah, that's so true. Because Brad Harden doesn't have conflict.
No, I'm avoidant with some people, and I'm full on, like trained attack dog with the other.
With a son person.
Right. With I tend to, it's fear-based for sure. Like fear that if I let this opportunity go where I can clearly teach them a lesson and they have to be in the moment in order to connect all the dots, because I've connected 57 dots here.
Sure.
So I need to take this exact moment to explain all of it.
That's right.
And if I miss that opportunity, I'm a bad parent.
Oh, boy.
So I go in pretty hard with the kids, and then I tend to try to avoid with the husband. Yeah.
With the husband.
And with, pretty much everything. Or not totally avoid, but I am better at writing it out. Like seeing where it goes, adjusting myself if I can. So, yeah, it really is contingent on
the person.
The person.
And that makes sense. And that's kind of a good segue into this conversation, because I think her book is a really great roadmap through all the relationships that you have. You don't have to come in going, I'm getting diagnosed with this one type of responder. It's more like she goes, here's some language around every relationship you have. Here, let me help you evaluate it with clarity. Let's talk about its value in your life, and is this worth leaning into or leaning away from, either temporarily or permanently. And let's talk about boundaries. And so we have a really great guest. As mentioned, Amy Harden was like, this is my request. And so I guess we just used our power and went and got her.
I guess so.
I love that for us.
It's magic.
It's magic. You might have seen her videos, frankly, on TikTok for sure, or Instagram. We have Casey Davis today. So she is a licensed professional counselor. She's an author. She's a speaker. But she is a very compassionate, very funny, like down-to-earth voice. That I think is really needed and crucial right now. She created this pretty amazing platform called Struggle Care. And it's where she kind of, like Amy just talked about, she teaches us how to care for our homes, our lives without shame, which is a key distinctor. I don't think that's a word. Distinctive. It's a key distinctive between some of the other ways we get self-care, home care instruction. Like she doesn't say, if this is hard for you, if this isn't done, if this is piling up, it's not because you're lazy and it's not because you're broken. It's because you're living a life. And those things, like we just mentioned, are morally neutral. It's just a soft way to enter this space. And so she wrote a book about that. Her first book was called How to Keep House While Drowning. Did you read that? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Game changer for tons of people.
Yeah.
And she's back now with a brand new book. That's what we're going to talk about today. And it's called Who Deserves Your Love? And so in my mind, it's kind of taking it from this sort of internal space that she begun. And now we're turning the gaze outwards. What about these people? Who do we live with? Who do we care about? Who we're in relationship with? And so this is about how we figure out which relationships we want to invest in, which ones need boundaries, and then maybe which ones we need to step away from. And so she brings her same type of compassion to this conversation. So this isn't a long list of shoulds and shouldn'ts. She doesn't attach, a lot of like morality in some ways, which she actually clarifies. She makes this accessible for us to do this work without shame, and makes sense of this very messy, very complicated work that we have to do of loving people and loving ourselves at the same time. So I think you're going to love this conversation. I had several like ding ding moments in the middle of it. And I really appreciated her candor and her own personal transparency and the way in which she just made this feel like this is doable. I can do this. This is the way I would like to show up in relationships, and it is possible. So having said that, I am delighted to welcome the incredible Casey Davis to the show. All right, Casey, welcome to the For the Love podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's so fun to meet you. You occupy such like interesting and original space in the world, and that is special when every like person on earth now is like a YouTube star. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know. I feel like sometimes my publishers will give me some advice about like, let's, make sure that you're really projecting that you're a credible expert. I mean, 'cause I'm like usually like shooting TikToks from the toilet.
Sure.
And I'm just like, I'll try. I'll try.
Oh, that's so relatable. No, that's the secret sauce that you have. Don't listen to them. Don't project more credibility, please. Like,
Yeah.
We've got plenty of people projecting credibility. Everyone's projecting their credibility at us. Like, I find what I crave in these kind of conversations that you are leading, that you are clearly qualified to lead, is accessibility, relatability, vulnerability. Like that's my secret elixir. So
Yeah.
project zero competence is what I'm trying to say. Okay.
I will say I found you in maybe 2021.
Yeah.
At a time when I was getting like some diagnoses that explained a little bit about why I felt how I did and why my brain did the things it did. And I downloaded all of your resources.
Oh, did you, Amy? I did not even know that.
And I tend to fall back on sort of rigid systems, and I work really hard to go listen to your voice again so it can be my new tape deck, like just reminding me that my closing duties can change based on how I feel that day. So it's really helped so much. I appreciate it.
She projected
More-
so much competence on you. That is delightful.
No, she just was kind
Yeah, that's the
in
deal.
the delivery.
Yep.
Like I actually believed you when you said you deserve XYZ.
Yeah.
And these things are morally neutral.
You're right. That is a powerful term. I want to go back to that real quick because we're absolutely going to talk about your new book, Who Deserves Your Love, which is really exciting and really important. I don't know a single person, not one, that does not have a complicated relationship in their life that they are navigating. So this is absolutely universal. Before we get to it, I want to sort of talk about you from a high level. First of all, I'm going to give you two questions and you can answer them in this order. For people who maybe are new to you, who haven't seen yet your work and what your deal, can you talk a little bit about the high points of your story? And this is my deal, and this is where I came, and this is where I sort of experienced liftoff, really, in a outward facing way. And then my next question before we get sort of into the weeds is I'd like to hear about just in general, your approach to care, to struggle care, the way in which you speak, the language you choose, the ethos you are creating. And okay, there. So
Okay.
1, 2, there we go. Okay.
All right. So let's start with going to rehab at 15.
Okay, let's go there.
And I will speed up from there, I promise. On the first day. No.
Yeah.
So I ended up with a really bad drug addiction when I was 15. I've got addiction in my family. I had some childhood trauma. And it was the kind of childhood trauma where it was like screwed up enough to screw you up, but not screwed up enough for you to feel like you deserved to be screwed up.
Totally. What a good description.
Right. And so drug addiction, I ended up in long-term rehab for like 18 months in this like intense behavioral modification, troubled teen industry type of place. Got out when I was 18 and joined like a 12-step type of group and did that for a couple of years and then had like a conversion experience and was like really heavy into an evangelical church for a while. Started working in the addiction industry and decided to get a master's in counseling, became an addiction counselor. And in that, like when you go from troubled teen rehab to 12-step group, and the 12-step group I was in was like a very kind of culty type of group with very, very like strict rules.
Oh.
And I was craving that because I had just come from a place where like my every decision was managed for me. And then like I eventually left that, and the church that I was at was really helpful. But at the same time, I was still like looking for the same thing in a church. Like,
Sure.
just tell me what to do.
Yep.
Just tell me what to do, and I will do it. And then I will feel like I am a good person and I am worthy of love. And so I was really into rules, really into getting it right. And then I married my husband who, while we share the same faith, like doesn't have hangups about rules at all. And I was like, to me, I was like, I am marrying a bad boy.
Totally.
But he was really helpful in kind of helping me chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that, you know, I was such a self-absorbed kid. Most kids are, right? And I was pretty selfish and I was pretty manipulative. And I was always thinking about myself and how I could get what I wanted. And when I got sober and when I got healthy and when I started being in therapy and really just devouring self-help and therapeutic process, and I want to mature and I want to grow, I was still thinking about myself at the same frequency. Like everything was still me, like ruminating about myself. Except instead of ruminating about, hey, do my like drug addict friends think I'm cool enough? Now I'm ruminating about like, hey, does the pastor think I'm holy enough?
Totally.
You know? And so I was able to kind of break out of that when I moved away from our city. And I was working in the industry and I was running these workshops for families whose loved ones were in drug rehab and talking about boundaries and relationships and things like that. And then I had a baby. And that was great. And then I was pregnant with a second baby. And I was like, okay, I really want to plan for the postpartum stage. I was not prepared the first time it happened. And so I came up with this incredible plan for postpartum mental health support. Unfortunately, I gave birth 3 weeks before the COVID-19 shutdowns.
Oh boy.
So it's me with a not quite 2-year-old
Yeah.
and a newborn that just
No.
came out of the ICU in a new city where I knew no one.
Bless it.
Married to a husband who had just gotten his first corporate lawyer job, working 7 days
All
a week
the
right
all
now.
the hours.
Yeah.
Yes.
All the hours. And I just fell apart.
Mm.
And I was supposed to have childcare, and my family was supposed to come, and I was supposed to get meals dropped off, and I was supposed to go to play dates, and none of that was
Totally.
happening. And I slowly started to lose my mind.
Yeah.
And despite being a therapist, I did not realize that I had severe postpartum depression because I didn't feel sad.
Interesting distinction.
I was angry and numb. And my house started to fall apart. And I've always been a messy person. And I'd made peace with that because, I'd done 18 months of like waking up at 6:30 and cleaning every day.
Sure.
And showering every day. And then I got out and didn't do that ever again.
Okay, right.
I'm like
And
a
that was
twice
the
a week
end of
shower
that story.
girly, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not great at cleaning. I'm very messy. So I knew early on that like those things weren't related to like how healthy or mature or responsible I was.
Sure.
Because I was those things and I was still a kind of a pig when it came to like being messy. And so I'm sitting here but it's always been functional. And for the first time, it wasn't functional.
Yeah.
There aren't plates to eat off of. I can't move anywhere in my house.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have clean laundry. And I randomly got on TikTok and started talking about this struggle. And I've always had to come up with these like weird ways to like trick myself into cleaning. I found out as an adult that I have ADHD, which is part of why. And I started like posting these little hacks, and they were like weird little hacks. And people really resonated with them because they were different than just clean up as you go. Because
Sure.
like, I'd rather die.
Yeah.
But what really resonated with people was I would get all these comments about like, I've never seen anyone's house that looked like mine. And I feel so ashamed at how messy I am.
Yeah.
And that just kind of like triggered the therapist in me to want to talk about like messiness is not a moral failing. And you deserve like either your messiness is just a part of your personality and it's pretty functional for you and like you don't need to change anything and accept yourself, kumbaya, or like your messiness or your inability to brush your teeth or get your dishes done, like maybe it's because you're having a hard time.
Yeah.
But like either way, you deserve compassion and non-judgmental help. Like no one has ever shamed themselves into better mental health.
Yeah.
And so that kind of became what the program, the platform of Struggle Care was about, is that like I saw that self-care was really looked at as this like separate list of things, this to-do list. And it was just another thing we all felt guilty about not making time for. And that our worthiness was measured by these external standards of like, what does my house look like?
Yeah.
And, what does my job performance look like? And what does my relationship look like? And when I'm trying to kind of like beat myself into submission and shame myself into productivity, it might work for like spurts of being productive, of like getting everything under control, turning a new leaf. I'm going to start running tomorrow at 6 a.m. and eating leafy greens. But then like it burns out. And then I'm back to like, eating a milkshake at 3 a.m. and being like, I suck.
Totally.
And it's just like this cycle that repeats over and over and over. So my whole platform is like, let's get out of the cycle.
Yeah.
Like self-care is not the thing you do to make yourself not struggle. It is learning how to take care of yourself while you struggle.
That's good.
Yeah.
And that's what that language shift is. It's like, I'm not going to say I should go clean my dishes. I'm going to say I deserve a clean dish to eat off of.
It's so good. Such a good mental shift.
Yeah.
And a profound difference. That energy is completely different from the shame to one of worth. Just a game changer, which is why everybody responded to you in the way in which they did. Especially at the time when we were all drowning in our homes with the children and the lack of community. And it was just right person, right time, right place, right message for sure.
Yeah. I think it helped so many people sort of save themselves day to day. Like I learned that sometimes I need to stay in bed for a whole day to rest because I woke up with, 2 spoons instead of 12, which is how you like just a chronic illness measurement. And it changed everything when I realized it's okay if you have to rest for a full day.
That's right.
Like, I'm not going to feel better if I don't do it. But there's a chance I'll feel better tomorrow if I do.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's just a huge shift in language. From that platform and all the resources you put out for struggle care, what made you turn your focus to relationships with this new book?
So, the foundation of when I was talking about self-care and home care and things like that has always been self-compassion as opposed to shame, and really making like an internal motivation instead of an external motivation. And just like you said, I find that most of us are kind of, what we lack is like an internal compass that we trust, because we have the value of rest, we have the value of hard work, but what's hard is like when I'm hurting, I'm not sure which of those values I'm supposed to be pushing into at any given moment. And I'm afraid that if I do it wrong, there's something wrong with me. If I accidentally press into rest when I should have pressed into hard work, well, I'm lazy. But if I accidentally press into hard work instead of rest, well, now I'm pushing myself too far and I don't have boundaries. And it's like, no matter what we do, if we don't get the right answer, we feel shame about it. And so bringing in this idea of self-compassion and speaking to ourselves gently, and it being okay to make mistakes and be human, what I found was when people started to kind of get their legs under them with self-compassion, naturally one of two things happened, is that they're kind of looking down at themselves. And then when they kind of get the grip on that, they look up at these relationships that they're in. And one of two things happened. They go, I'm learning to treat myself gently. And now I'm realizing there are some people in my life that do not treat me gently.
Right.
That are not extending me compassion. And I'm starting to believe that I deserve it. And then the second thing that happens is that we look up and we go, oh, I really want to extend the compassion that I've benefited from myself to others. I don't want to shame people. I want to be compassionate to others. But when you are compassionate to yourself, it changes your behavior. When you are compassionate to other people, it can have a very deep effect on them. It is not necessarily a formula for changing other people's behavior.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so you find yourself in a relationship, and lots of relationships that have these issues, and maybe someone is doing something hurtful or harmful to you, and you're like, but I want to be compassionate. I don't want to shame them. I don't want to, drop them or kick them. I struggled so much feeling like I deserved to be kind of cut off or dropped because I'm not perfect. And now I'll feel so bad if I cut somebody else off for not being perfect. And we really struggle with our compassion versus our boundaries, and they feel in conflict. And I just found that was kind of the natural place that everybody was moving once they kind of got the self-compassion with self-care under their feet. And so I wanted to move into talking about what does that look like?
That's good.
We do have to judge our relationships.
Certainly.
We do have to judge other people's behavior. But what does that look like to judge other people's behavior in such a way that we still feel like we are meeting our responsibilities to people? We're leaning into our values of compassion and grace, but we're also meeting our responsibilities to ourselves and coming up with a framework to make decisions about our relationship that become an internal compass instead of an external compass. Because, I talk a lot about moral neutrality and how often you do your dishes is morally neutral, and whether you're messy is morally neutral. And so eventually people started saying, well, it's like you think everything's morally neutral. Is there anything that's not morally neutral? And my answer has always been yes, the way you treat people. The way you treat people is not morally neutral. So that immediately, now we're talking about relationships.
Yeah.
But there is a sense of moral neutrality I want to bring into this, which isn't that somebody hurting you is okay or that you hurting other people is okay. It is that when we're trying to make decisions about our relationship, a lot of the advice out there is very moralizing. So if I stay in this relationship, does that make me weak?
I see.
Yeah.
Right? Because you get a lot of, I would never put up with that.
Sure.
Girl, kick him to the curb, right? Or if I pull away from this relationship with my mother, am I a bad daughter? So that's kind of how we got to relationships. It's like, could there be a way of making decisions about our relationships that make us feel like we can put our head on the pillow at night, like we have integrity, like we have values, and that we have been compassionate?
We definitely want to parse out some of the specifics that you outline, but I wonder one notch before then, because you're pretty open about it in the book, just about your own relationship history. And
Yeah.
so can you talk a little bit about your personal story, your relationships that certainly had to have an effect on the shape of this work, of this book, and of how you are now as an adult?
Yeah. So I talk in the introduction of the book about my relationship with my dad
Yeah.
because it was probably one of the most influential relationships in my life, my mom and my dad, which I think is probably true of everyone. But my dad had addiction problems. And he and my mom got divorced really young. And immediately when I started to really struggle with their divorce, the way that I interpreted my parents' reactions was like the way that 5-year-olds interpret things, which is it's about me.
Sure.
So my mom, who's a very emotional person, like, when I'm crying and I want my dad and she's crying with me, I'm interpreting that as like my mom really cares about my pain. And when I'm screaming and crying for my mom at my dad's, and my dad is kind of stony-faced, tight-lipped, not really having a lot of emotion, my 5-year-old brain is going, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about my pain. And like you add a little addiction into the mix, a little emotional distance, and we start to have this high conflict relationship where I lash out a lot and he comes down hard. And his discipline's really inconsistent because when he is drunk, there's no discipline. And then when he isn't, he's trying to be a dad and discipline. And I'm like, get out of here, right?
Yeah.
And so I grow up with this story that my dad doesn't love me, that he only wanted custody of me to punish my mom, and that I am unworthy of love. And this begins to color every situation in my life. So like when I got brown hair and I'm pale and I have this like best friend that's blonde and blue-eyed and the boys are chasing her on the playground and I'm chasing the boys. And no one's chasing me.
Yeah.
Right? That's just like such a nothing burger of a experience for a child, but for me, the way that I interpreted that was like, see,
Yeah.
you're not enough. You're not enough. And my whole life became defined by knowing that I wasn't enough and thinking that the only way I was ever going to experience affection or love or belonging was to manipulate everyone around me. And not like maliciously. I wasn't trying to like hurt people, but like I need to be who you want me to be.
Of course.
I need to figure out what you like, figure out what you want, figure out like one memory that sticks in my head is like I went to Catholic school. And when you go to mass on Fridays and you say the Our Father, everybody holds hands. And so I came up with this plan of like, there's this boy that everybody likes that I really want to like me. And maybe if like we are next to each other and he holds my hand, he'll have like an aha moment.
Of course.
And so from the moment I get into class, it's like this scheme in my head of like, how am I going to get next to him and not look like I'm trying to get next to him?
Sure.
And then when I get next to him, how am I going to make sure that the break in the pews isn't between me and him so we're on different pews?
Sure.
Now, this is like such a silly example, but when I tell you that this amount of mental labor went into almost every interaction, to try and gain some sort of counterfeit affection so that I could feel it for just a minute.
Man.
From, I go into a party and I'm thinking to myself, if I get drunk enough, I can get a boy to fool around with me and I'll feel wanted.
Yeah.
If I can get myself addicted to cocaine, and cut on my wrists, maybe someone will feel sorry for me and want to save me. And I am viscerally aware that most people that like go to a party and drink like don't want to be sexually assaulted.
Sure.
And most people who end up
Yeah.
addicted to cocaine, it was like this slow descent that they had no control over. And the fact that I want those things and I'm engineering those things just like deepens this shame about like how pathetic I am.
Yeah.
And this, you can see how like there's not a relationship in my life that wasn't touched and colored by this.
Yeah.
Every person I meet is above me or below me. And that's how I was when I landed in rehab.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that, like so candidly. And sometimes it's really important to understand what built the house.
Yeah.
That really helps frame up your perspective, your story, your arc. Thank you for being so honest about that.
I want to talk about the book,
Yeah.
Who Deserves Your Love? It's organized into 3 sections. It's so accessible.
Yep.
By the way, I know that was all intentional. The font. In the introduction, you say, if you don't have the bandwidth to read the whole book, go to this chapter and this chapter. Like, it's such important work to let everyone know that it's a safe place to get good information. The 3 sections. So you've got how to work on your relationships, how to make decisions about your relationships, and how to understand and use boundaries. And it's always so compassionate. And right out of the gate, you write about the 3 types of relationship harm.
Yeah.
Screw ups, mistreatment, and abuse. Can you break down those 3 for us?
I screenshot that page.
Yeah, so we know what we're evaluating for the rest of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also want to say like the reason why I wanted that to be the first thing we talk about is because again, like I think most of us when we're in our relationships, if have any modicum of self-awareness, the question we're usually asking ourselves is like, am I the asshole?
Right.
Right? Like we really want to know, am I, because I don't want to make either mistake. I don't want to think that it's all you and I'm being blind to what I'm bringing to the table. But I also don't want to assume that it's me and then I'm being a doormat and I'm letting someone mistreat me. And so I wanted to start by kind of defining like, what do we even mean when we talk about like relationships are hard?
Yep.
And so screw ups are hurtful or harmful behavior. And I am typically talking here about like things that are emotionally hurtful or harmful.
Sure.
If somebody smacks you across the face, like that's an abusive act every single time.
That's right.
Yeah.
If somebody touches you sexually without your consent or exposes you to sexual material without, like that's abusive every single time. We're more talking about like labeling an entire relationship abusive. And that's a little bit harder when you don't have those like black or white, either physical or sexual acts happening. So a screw up is a hurtful or harmful behavior. And this is anything from they roll their eyes, at you, to they ghost you, to someone cheated on you, to, your mom maybe saying something about your weight. It's anything there. No matter how small or how minor, because as a therapist, this is also the thing, like when you go online and you're looking at like the general conversations around relationships, there's kind of this idea that like, I would never put up with that. I would never put up with someone that cheats on me. That's always bad. That's always something evil. That's nothing you can overcome. And you're so weak if you stick around and have some, whatever. As a therapist, we see y'all in the office, okay? We know that it is much more complex, even with really, really difficult things like that. And I have seen good people cheat on their spouse. And I have seen what I think to be like chronically horrible people have just a trail of lesser offenses throughout their relationship. So that's a screw up. You could really, almost anything, no matter how harmful, could be just a screw up that you can overcome. When we move on to the second category, which is mistreatment, let's say that we have someone who is continuously hurting or harming you, Doesn't have to necessarily be the same behavior, but usually it's like the same type of behaviors. And you have brought this up. You want to work on this relationship. And the response that you're getting is someone patently refusing to address that behavior. So either outright saying, too bad, that's on you. This is who I am. I'm not going to change. Or it could be someone giving lip service to like, oh, you're right, baby, I'll change. Or, okay, you know, I'll try harder. But not actually taking any steps to do anything different, right? That is mistreatment. That is an unequal relationship and an unfair relationship. And you can work on your relationship all day long. But if somebody is refusing to engage, like you can only go so far in that relationship. You cannot manipulate someone into not mistreating you. And so that's that one. And then the third one is abuse. And so it's the same two things. So hurt and harm, a pattern of refusal to address the hurt and harm. And there is an element of coercion, control, degradation, or humiliation in that relationship. And that's when we can say this is an abusive relationship. It's the difference between an unfair relationship and an unsafe relationship. So an example of mistreatment might be a spouse that it could be something as simple as like they overspend a lot and you have tried to bring it up and they just don't stop overspending and it's harming your bank account and it's hurting your feelings. It could be someone who cheats a lot. It could be someone who, you know, when you had a baby, you gave up all your hobbies and they continue to have a 12-hour bicycling ride every Saturday and go hunting every other weekend. And you've brought it up and they just are saying, well, I'm not going to change. So like, it's not saying mistreatment is okay or acceptable or not as hurtful. It's just a different dynamic.
Yeah.
That's super helpful as people learn to sort of diagnose their relationships in an honest way, in a truthful way, with kind of clear eyes. I want to talk about something else that you write about, which is the vulnerability cycle. Can you discuss that and how it helps us understand recurring conflicts?
Yeah. So I want to give kind of a short example from my own life, which is a real treat. I don't talk a lot about me and my husband's relationship because I don't like when people make themselves experts on relationships and then like their relationship is the object lesson.
Totally.
So I feel like it's just like asking for a divorce.
Totally.
However, I had sent him a text message and I was very vulnerable in what I was saying. And he had this kind of short, clippy response, and it really upset me. And I got home and I told him I was upset. And that was hard because we are kind of a conflict avoidant. And he was like, okay, and just walked out of the room. And I have, because of my dad, I have a real sensitivity to feeling abandoned.
Sure.
To feeling like I'm not enough. But in particular, that like little trigger for me is like people who check out. My dad used to give me like the silent treatment for days. And he was kind of emotionally distant. And so that begins to trigger my fight or flight.
Yeah.
And, you know, I want to say something and I want to get loud and I want to stomp after him and I want to make him listen to me because like, you will not abandon me.
Yeah.
And the problem is that my husband is someone who is easily overwhelmed by open conflict. And he needs time to process his thoughts and feelings before talking, right? And so that's hard for me because the more he needs space, the more I feel panicked and the more I want to lean in and get in his face. And the more I do that, the more he pulls away and the more, right? So that's kind of a little working vulnerability cycle. But what was funny was like when we did finally talk, he said to me, you know, I have told you before, I do not like serious conversations via text. It doesn't work for me. I don't understand the tone of them. I don't process them. I'm always somewhere else. And I feel as though it was childish of you to send this knowing that. Right. So that is the story that he tells himself about my text. She's being childish because she knows I don't like this. And he didn't say this, but I think if I was in his shoes, I might even have the story of like, this is purposefully kind of a trap,
Sure.
Yeah.
going for a weak spot so that I screw up so that she can get upset about it. Right? And what was funny was, as he was explaining that to me, I was able to say, so let me share with you what's really going on. I send text messages because I can choose every word carefully.
Yeah.
Because what happens to me when I come in to have a serious conversation with my husband, because he doesn't like open conflict a lot, sometimes he'll be a little short in his responses. He's not an angry guy. But when he's a little uncomfortable with the conversation, it's like, okay. Like it takes a little bit for him to not have like the, okay, fine, like the kind of like whatever. But like I interpret every little struggle like that as anger. And I have a real sensitivity to anger and angry men. And I start to panic and I start to stumble over my words and I start to not know what I'm talking about. And all I can think is, he's upset with me. He's angry with me. He doesn't want to have this conversation because he doesn't care. He doesn't care. My needs, my wants, my pain are such an inconvenience. Look at him. He's just irritated. He's inconvenienced. So that's the story that I have about his behavior. And so something as simple as a text message, from my point of view, you know, I'm avoiding an in-person conversation because he gets angry when I have an in-person conversation and I can't put my thoughts together and I'm too scared to do it. So I'm going to send a text and he's not going to respond because he doesn't care. That's going to be my story, right?
I see.
But then in his point of view, his story is, I have expressed to my wife the best way to communicate with me, and she refuses to communicate with me in a way that allows me to communicate honestly, and instead puts these little minefields, childish little minefields, to blow up in my face so that she can be the victim.
I see.
Right? So when we sit down and we realize that, oh, both of our stories are wrong, but we have this vulnerability cycle where I'm reacting to my sensitivity, like you're the way that you deal with your emotions activates my sensitivities. And then I have a defense mechanism that activates your sensitivities. And we're kind of going
So
round
familiar.
and round and round. Right? So fill in the blank with whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be your romantic partner. This can be your mom. This could be your sister. This could be, you know, if you're talking to your sister about we need to help mom, and one of you has always been the responsible one, and one of you has always felt like, you know, I always get overlooked. And, you know, one of them's going, well, you're not taking this seriously. It's like, well, you're being bossy and taking over. I mean, it's kind of like, that's what it looks like. So that's a little like snapshot at what the vulnerability cycle is.
God, why do those two people always marry each other? You know, where we hit each other's like internal detonation. You just described 26 years of marriage for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That we circled that drain so many times and just could not get over the story that we were telling ourselves about the other one's response. That is rude of you to come in here on this show and expose us all.
I love throughout the book, you have really clear illustrations of each of the three sections of the book. And you give a lot of different examples in different types of relationships, not just romantic ones. And it's so helpful because you can see the patterns so clearly in all of our relationships, with, you know, the little arrows going between the two brains over and over and over. Yeah. The next big section is the relationship decision tree. Which is a framework for sort of determining the nature of a relationship and how to make decisions about it. Can you explain kind of the choose your own adventure component of this exercise?
Yeah. So I think, you know, once we've kind of identified this vulnerability cycle, and as Jen mentioned, it's like, oh my God, this is 26 years of marriage, or this is 10 years of marriage. that's, we started with 3 different types of behavior. We've looked at, we are really triggering. And this is not to say that I am responsible for somebody else's defense mechanisms. So don't let anyone weaponize this, right? Well, I lash out because you do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
That's not what this is about. There are instructions in the book about how to talk to people about this cycle and how we can emotionally regulate, we can soothe our sensitivities, we can pull back our defense mechanisms, we can learn to communicate with each other. And as we're having those collaborative conversations, we are assessing, how is this going? Right? And so when I say to my husband, hey, maybe for 10 years I was saying, don't walk away from me, don't walk away from me, don't walk away from me. And now I'm looking at this decision tree and going, oh, I know why you're walking away. I'm going to change the story that I have about that.
That's good.
Sometimes changing the story that you have about it just it doesn't hurt when he walks away. But sometimes the sensitivity still is painful. And so it's not about changing everything overnight. But what I can say to him, which I did say to him, which is like, hey, when you go away and you take some time, when you are kind of done processing, what he would usually do is just like kind of, come downstairs and then just kind of start talking normally. Like, I've processed it, it's behind us. But I've got some sensitivity stuff around like the anger and the whatever. And so it was as simple as being like, hey, when you're done processing, instead of just kind of like acting like nothing happened.
Sure.
Do you think that you could just like kiss me on the head and say, I love you, I don't want to fight? And I can be like, okay. And it's like, sometimes those tiny little shifts, right, are enough of like, oh, we're both willing to make some small changes to help each other.
Yes.
Not that I'm responsible for his behavior, but if I can learn to communicate in a way that sidesteps some of his sensitivities so that we can better communicate, that's great. And maybe there's some things that are so deeply embedded that it's going to take more than small changes. Like maybe I need to go to therapy. I need to read some books. I need to take some time. Maybe something is so explosive, we need to take some time away from each other, go to marriage therapy. In that process, some of these relationships, people are going to get on board. Yeah, let's do it. Then they're going to start changing their behavior. They're going to start working on themselves. In some relationships, they are not. And then in a huge swath of gray in between the black and white will be you going, this person seems like they're working on it, but it's pretty slow. Maybe they're not working on it. Okay, they did it. They worked on it for a little bit. Now it seems like it's not bad, right? And we're kind of going, what do we do now? And that's where that second part of the book comes in. It's like, now I need to make some decisions. And, I give you 6 questions to ask yourself, like, do I want to continue to engage in this relationship, or do I need to disengage? And disengage doesn't necessarily mean like cut someone off completely. It can, but that's like the far end of disengage. Disengage simply means put some emotional or physical distance between you, either temporarily or permanently. So that's how we get to the decision tree, is because we're having to assess and judge somebody else's behavior. But we want to do that in a way, like basically it's built off of what I would be asking you as your therapist.
That part is so useful because it's that murky gray where most of us just flail around. We don't know what questions to ask ourselves. We don't know if we're over assessing or under assessing. So that is for someone who needs a roadmap, not just through conflict, although you do provide plenty of scaffolding around that, but around assessment, relational assessment. This is so useful. It is so practical. It is so helpful. It is like being in a therapy session. I want to ask you just one more question about the book as we kind of start to wrap up here. I want to talk about the last section. Obviously, we're just touching down. We're touching down on the tops of these mountains. And so there's so much more underneath each of them. But the last section is about boundaries. And I really appreciate the way in which you tackle this, because you write about how this concept has frequently frequently been misunderstood, misapplied. It's sort of a part of this pop psychology ethos that we all are deeply adjacent to now. And so I'd like to hear you talk about boundaries from your perspective. What's the most important thing that we need to remember when it comes to setting them and keeping them?
Yeah. So by the time you get through the decision tree is when you kind of know I need to lean in or I need to lean out.
Yeah.
And in the past, most of us have tried to make that decision with these two binary categories where we're going, I have to figure out if this is a good person or not. Because if they're a good person, I should stay. Because I'd be a bad person if I left.
Yes.
But if they're a bad person, I'm allowed to leave. Right? It's not that simple.
That's right.
So the decision tree, you've walked through, like looking at whether they're willing to change, whether they're able to change, what is the severity of the harm, and your values. Like, what are my values? What do I feel like I would be like transgressing my values if I stayed in this relationship? If I left this relationship, how do I look at my spiritual values or my cultural values? So by the time you've done all of that, you know whether you want to lean in, lean out, and then you need to know how to do that. And so boundaries helps us do that. But instead of thinking of boundaries as like scripts or how you ask someone to do something or making someone treat you better, I want us to think of boundaries as an internal understanding.
Yes.
And it is the understanding of where I end and where you begin. And if I understand sort of like psychically, like in our psyche, like where that line is, from that can flow authentic decisions. So you're not having to have your therapist tell you for every single nuanced decision, what do I do? What do I say? What do I do? What do I say? And so when we think of like a boundary line, so I don't talk about like setting boundaries, but the boundary between you and me, and on my side of that line are my feelings, my thoughts, my values, my decisions, the consequences of my actions. And on your side are your feelings and thoughts and whatever. But the other thing on my side are my responsibilities. And so depending on our relationship, I have different responsibilities. I have different responsibilities to somebody that I've dated for 6 months than somebody I have been married to for 10 years. I have a different level of responsibilities to my neighbor as I do a stranger, as I do a best friend, as I do yada, 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 right? And so boundaries is all about coming up with your internal framework where you are assessing when and how you have met your responsibilities to another person, with feedback, of course. You are listening to how your behavior affects other people and them. You are getting advice from other people, but that you are able to determine when a person's reaction, when their feelings about you, when their opinions on you are an accurate reflection of your reality or have stopped and just become their perception of reality. And from that, you can begin to make decisions much easier. And so, like, one example is, let's say that you tell your mom, hey, we're not allowing anyone to come and meet the baby unless they're vaccinated. And your mom's response is, I can't believe you would do this to me. You're punishing me. You're just being controlling. When we don't have boundaries, we automatically adopt what people say about us. Now, it might mean that you go, oh, maybe I'm being controlling, but it more means I need my mom to understand I'm not being controlling. And so we get in an argument, and now we're arguing. And now I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over. And maybe then we get tripped up in this kind of vulnerability cycle. And if my mom says, you're just trying to control me, and I say, well, too bad you think that way, and hang up the phone, I'm not saying that's like a boundary way to deal with it either. But if I were to look at, okay, on my side of the line is my responsibility to my newborn child and their health. And so here are my responsibilities. I feel strongly that that I'm meeting that responsibility by requiring people be vaccinated. However, I also have responsibility to my mom. Now, I don't have a responsibility to make my mom have a relationship with her grandchild. I don't have a responsibility to manage her emotions for her or her approval of me. But what do I have a responsibility to? Okay, I think I have a responsibility to be considerate of her feelings, to listen to her, to have empathy for her, to try and understand where she's coming from. I think I have a responsibility to be honest and kind and direct with her. And I think, because it's my mom, that I have a responsibility to make a good faith effort to correct misunderstandings. But here's where the boundary comes in. How many times of me repeating myself
Right. Good.
until I feel like, you know what, Mom? I'm not going to change your mind on this. But I have now hit my responsibility of trying to correct what your misinterpretations and make sure that I've stated my motives and my this and that and the other. And now my responsibility has ended. And now you begin. Now my mother's responsibility to chew on that, to think about that, to incorporate that, to manage her emotions about that. Now it's her job.
That's good.
And I don't have to keep going. I don't have to keep arguing. I don't have to keep begging. It's not my job to make someone understand me. And that's what boundaries are.
It's great.
Yeah.
I like people to understand me.
I want them to.
I want them to. I hate being misunderstood. But you are right. That prolonged attempt to bridge that gap is just the source of so much misery.
Yeah. And sometimes we'll then and this would come up a lot when I was working with addiction. It's like we try one thing and maybe we try begging and it doesn't change it. So now, now I'm going to try demanding.
Sure.
Well, now I'm going to try guilt tripping. And we're constantly changing tactics to try and get someone to change their behavior. And again, usually this is not malicious. You're trying to save someone's life,
Of
or you're
course.
trying to save your marriage, or you just want your mom to love you. But we're exhausting ourselves just constantly in that strategy, constantly trying to figure out how you could get yourself next to the popular boy in class so you can hold hands during the Our Father. Because if you could do that, then they would fall in love with you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Instead of recognizing I'm trying to control a whole host of things that I actually have no control over.
Yeah.
Even if I nailed the strategy, even if, so the two lies, right, is number one, that I can be a good enough strategist for long enough to always get next to the boy during the Our Father. But the second lie is, even if I am, I can't control what he feels when we hold hands. Yeah. And that's so true of everything.
It is.
Yeah.
That's a great metaphor.
These are such complex ideas, but again, you break them down so well. Your illustrations, I'll say it again, are amazing. Just, in the boundary section, the little drawing of the picket fence and digging into complicated things about over-functioning and an understanding that boundaries need to move within relationships sometimes. And the illustration of someone just constantly reaching over the other to the other side of the fence hit home so much. So I highly encourage people to get the book, to dig into your work, this and your previous stuff if they're not familiar with it. Where can everyone find you?
So I have a website called strugglecare.com, and you can pretty much get to everything from there. I'm on Instagram as Struggle Care. I'm on Facebook as Struggle Care. I'm on TikTok as Domestic Blisters. Yeah. I did not plan for that to kick off. So that is a different name. And you can get my first book, How to Keep House While Drowning, and of course the second book, Who Deserves Your Love, on Amazon, on bookshop.org, at a lot of independent bookstores, Barnes & Noble, kind of anywhere you can get them. And I also have them both on audiobook as well, where I read the book. So that's a lot of people prefer that as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so delighted to have met you, and you're just like we thought you would be, which is a compliment. I mean that as a high compliment. And thank you for doing this work, and just in a time and a place where mental health is apparently a luxury of the healthcare industry, and not everybody can afford therapy and counselors and this sort of intervention. This stands in the gap for
Yeah.
just people who need this sort of instruction and this sort of clarity and even the language and the counsel. And it's just a real service. So thank you for making it accessible to everybody. And
Yeah.
we're just so delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you.
All right, you guys, I hope that was helpful. I mean, really and truly, when I tell you we barely scratched the surface, like we just touched down on the big ideas of the book. But if you wanted to hear more about any of that, she really, really fleshes it out here for just a normal person to be able to understand, assimilate, and put into practice. And so you can get her book, Who Deserves Your Love, anywhere books are sold. It's out. It's not a hard read. It's not dense. It isn't 500 pages long. Like, this is the book for the normal people. And so, also, we'd love to hear your thoughts around this episode or any of them. If you go over to jenhatmaker.com under the podcast tab, you won't only find this whole episode and the show notes, and we'll put links over there, by the way, for all of Casey's stuff. But you can also leave a message for me and Amy. There's a send voicemail button. You could just press it and leave a minute or two long message. You can either tell us something you heard in this episode, something you're working on, an aha moment of your own. You can tell us something you'd like to hear, a conversation you'd like us to host, or a guest you think we would love. Whatever. We like all your messages. And we're going to play some of those inside some of our episodes. And so thanks for reaching out to us in that way. That's our favorite way to hear from you. And thanks for joining us today, you guys. Follow this. If you're not already subscribed to the show, we'd love for you to do that. Wherever you listen to your shows, just hit follow or subscribe or add. There's just a really easy way to put this show into your library. And then it'll be a catalog of every episode we've ever done. So you can find it all really easily from there. So thanks for doing that. We sure love that. And we thank you for reviewing us and rating us. We read everything you send us. All right. With that, we've got more incredible guests coming up in the next few weeks, and we can't wait for you to hear them. See you next week.